My name is Dana Whitley, and 3 months ago my father told me my ideas were a joke. Today I handed him a glossy food magazine with my face on the cover and said, "This is the jam you said was a carnival trick." Then I walked away, while my sister Ashley fumbled to turn off the factory stove before it boiled over again. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Because if you've ever had to prove your worth to the people who were supposed to believe in you first, then this story is for you. It was 7:12 a.m. in Asheville, North Carolina, and the kitchen was already thick with the smell of boiling fruit and steam. The walls of our family jam factory dripped with old labels, like a history lesson no one asked for. My hands trembled slightly as I set the small glass jar on the counter, careful not to let the steam fog its clarity. Hibiscus and cherry, my boldest blend yet. A ribbon of deep ruby shimmered in the light. "Just try it," I said, sliding a tasting spoon across the flour-dusted metal table. "It's sweet at the front, then you get the floral right at the end." My father, Everett Whitley, a man whose face could sour a ripe peach, barely looked up from the order ledger. His gray brows rose, unimpressed, before he scoffed without tasting it. "Enough with your ridiculous experiments, Dana. We're running a business, not a carnival." The words landed like a slap, sharp and loud in the hushed clatter of morning prep. My mother, Teresa, glanced at the floor. Ashley, my baby sister by 10 years and our newly minted high school graduate, stifled a giggle. "It's not a joke, Dad," I said, my voice tight. "It's an innovation. This flavor will confuse people," he cut in, finally lifting the jar to eye level like it had insulted him. "Hibiscus. What even is that? You think folks coming into Whitley's Jam want to taste flowers?" Ashley snorted. "Sounds like something you'd serve with goat cheese at a vegan picnic." I ignored her. "I ran a tasting panel with the market team. It scored higher than blueberry and even strawberry basil." "We don't need a panel," Everett barked. "We've been in business for 38 years. You think your fancy degrees and Sunday school science make you smarter than your own blood?" "No," I said slowly. "I think they gave me tools you never cared to use." There it was, I'd said it. I looked at Mom, hoping for some small sign of backup, but she was already stirring the giant copper kettle like she hadn't heard a word. "You're not here to play chef," my father said, standing now. He towered over me in that way he'd perfected, leaning in just enough to make you question your own space. "You're here to stick to what works." I stared at him, silent. If I said one more word, I'd either scream or cry. Neither would help. "I'm going to finish the batch from yesterday," I muttered, turning to grab the stainless tub from the cooler. Behind me, Ashley whispered something to Mom and laughed. The jar sat untouched on the counter. The kitchen noise had faded. The copper kettles were scrubbed, the tile floors rinsed, and Ashley had already skipped out early, something about plans with Clay that Dad just waved off like it was nothing. I stayed behind, settling into the back office where the air always smelled like paper and old fruit rinds. The small room felt like a mausoleum for our family's past, faded newspaper clippings from the 80s when Whitley's Jam was just 2 people and a roadside stand, an award plaque for Best Peach Preserves 1999, and shelves crowded with ancient jars that had long since crystallized inside. I stared at the inventory ledger, but all I could see was that untasted jar on the kitchen counter. My hibiscus cherry blend, just sitting there. Like I hadn't poured 3 weeks of testing, 2 burned batches, and a dozen hours of research into perfecting the acid balance so it wouldn't dull the floral notes. Like it wasn't the best thing I'd ever made. Maybe I'm the only one who cares anymore. The whisper escaped before I could stop it. It felt too real. Too dangerous. My fingers lingered on the keyboard, pretending to care about the raspberry batch count. Outside the office door, I could hear Dad's heavy boots as he moved down the hallway, calling out over his shoulder. Ashley left some lids half-sealed again. "Check him in the morning, would you?" "No thank you." "No sorry she didn't finish." Just a command, like I was still 12 and invisible. "I always check them," I murmured, but the door had already clicked shut. Through the little square window in the wall, I watched Mom wipe down the prep station. She moved slow, methodical. A woman who could read a room better than anyone, but never once used that power to defend me. She caught my eye for a half-second, then looked away. I could almost see the thought in her head, "Don't stir things. Everett doesn't mean anything by it." But he did mean it. He meant that my ideas were a threat. He meant that my degree in food science was a novelty. He meant that he still saw Ashley, who once scorched 24 jars of apple butter because she forgot to stir, as more worthy of being listened to than me. They don't see me, I said softly. I could have gone home. Micah probably had dinner waiting. I could already picture the little farmhouse kitchen, the warm yellow light, the smell of rosemary or whatever he'd thrown into the cast iron tonight. But instead, I leaned forward and opened the laptop again. Column by column, I started logging inventory. Real numbers. Every crate, every lid, every spoiled case Ashley forgot to log. I organized the digital stock sheet by expiration dates, then by storage placement. I corrected the pH logging notes from last week again. This was my contribution, even if no one noticed. At 9:37 p.m., I finally closed the laptop. The factory was dark, the only light coming from the green glow of the exit sign over the hallway door. My neck ached. My fingers were stained from pressing too many labels that day. I reached for my bag and glanced at the tiny corner shelf behind me, the one where I kept a few personal things. My hibiscus cherry jar was there. I'd moved it when no one was looking. I picked it up, held it in the soft light. No cracks in the seal, the color still rich and bold. The taste inside just waiting to be noticed. Micah had said last week, "You could bottle sunshine and Everett would say it's too bright." I smiled faintly. Then frowned again, because the problem wasn't just Everett anymore. It was all of them. Every one of them who stood by while I was treated like an intern with a stubborn streak. And the worst part? I kept letting them. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like buttered toast and betrayal. Micah had already kissed me goodbye and gone out to check the fence line, so it was just me and my mug of too hot coffee when my phone buzzed. 8:07 a.m. Ashley. Dad says come to the house instead of the factory. Family breakfast. Family breakfast meant one of two things. Either someone had died or Everett was about to hand out marching orders like we were in boot camp. I parked outside the house, our family's creaky old white farmhouse, and walked in to find the table already crowded. Ashley sat at the end, practically glowing in one of Dad's old plaid shirts, sleeves rolled up like she knew what was coming. Mom was stacking pancakes on a platter like we were 10 years old again. Dad sat in his usual chair at the head, sipping black coffee with the air of a man about to announce something that couldn't be questioned. "Dana," he said with a nod. "Sit." I sat slowly. Something in my chest tightened. "Got some good news," Everett began, laying his thick hands flat on the table like he was starting a prayer. "Business is growing, but we need new energy, someone fresh with ideas." Flicker of a second, my heart lifted. He noticed. Ashley's going to be stepping into the role of production manager starting today. The silence was so thick it sucked the breath from my lungs. My spoon, halfway to my mouth, hung in the air for a second before dropping with a small clink into my oatmeal bowl. "She's what?" I asked, blinking. Ashley beamed. "Crazy, right? I thought he was joking at first." Everett chuckled like this was all part of some adorable sitcom. I stared at them. "She's 18, she hasn't even used the accounting software. She doesn't know how to schedule deliveries or run the pH checks or, then teach her," Dad cut in, that familiar edge sharpening his voice. "If you care that much." "But that's my job," I said. The words fell out flat and stunned. "I'm production manager." "You were," he replied like it was just an update, like telling someone they'd missed a phone call. "But you've been focused on other things lately." "You mean flavor development?" I shot back. "You mean taking initiative?" Ashley's eyes went wide. "Whoa, okay, don't make this weird. I didn't ask for this, Dad offered it." Dad cleared his throat. "It's a family business. We rotate, we adapt. I'm still keeping you on for quality control and support, like I was a part-time substitute teacher in my own life." Mom still hadn't looked up from her plate. She was slicing bananas now, eyes on the fruit like it held the answers. "And my pay?" I asked quietly. Dad frowned like I'd asked something ungrateful. "We'll adjust accordingly. Ashley's stepping into a leadership role, the rest of us need to follow suit." My stomach churned. Follow suit. Not only had I been demoted with a side of pancakes, but now I was expected to train my replacement. My younger sister, who couldn't even remember to turn off the burner last week and nearly melted a whole case of labels. Ashley twirled a fork between her fingers, her voice sing-songy. "So you'll show me how the production calendar works, and how to label the backstock." I looked at her, really looked, and for a second I wasn't sure who I was angrier at. Her for accepting a crown she hadn't earned, or myself for handing her the scepter every time she dropped it. "I have meetings today," I said flatly, standing. Dad's eyes narrowed. Meetings, inventory, vendor calls, that quality control you wanted. I grabbed my bag. But don't worry. I'll leave the keys to the production office on the desk, since it's yours now. Ashley blinked. Wait, are you mad? I smiled, and it felt like cracking porcelain. No, Ashley, I'm inspired. Then I walked out the door and didn't look back, even when I heard her laugh and say, she's so dramatic. I didn't cry until I was halfway to the factory. And I didn't stop until I was parked in the lot, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to the earth. They'd cut me out, and expected me to smile about it. That evening, the sun was slipping behind the mountains, pouring gold over our porch like warm honey. I sat curled in the old rocking chair Micah built when we first moved in, barefoot, knees to my chest, a mug of tea gone cold in my hands. I hadn't said much since I got home. Didn't trust myself to. Micah stepped out onto the porch with 2 slices of peach pie and his usual quiet calm. He handed me a plate without a word, then sat beside me, elbow on the armrest, eyes scanning the treetops like they held the answers. I didn't eat lunch, I muttered. I know, he said gently. Figured I'd better get sugar in you before you turn to ash. The porch creaked as we rocked in uneven rhythm. The wind rustled through the trees and far-off cicadas sang like they were trying to drown out my thoughts. They gave it to her, I finally said. Production manager. Just handed it to her like it was a party favor. And now I'm support. Micah didn't respond right away. That was his way. Let me fill the silence. Let me bleed the words until I could breathe again. She doesn't even know the basics, Micah. She still thinks sterilization cycle means running the jars under hot water, and they want me to train her, for less money, like I should be grateful I'm still included. Micah looked over at me, his hazel eyes steady and knowing. You sound more shocked than angry. Because I am, my voice cracked. I thought maybe stupidly, I thought they'd at least pretend to care what I've built. I thought Dad would get over himself long enough to see that I'm not just his extra hands. I've held that place together while Ashley's been playing career roulette for the last 2 years. And they hand her my job like it's a participation trophy. Micah chewed a bite of pie and swallowed. I've been thinking about something, he said slowly. Might be the wrong time to say it. I wiped my eyes with my sleeve. There's no right time anymore, go ahead. He pulled his phone from his back pocket, tapped the screen a few times. What if we just made the jam here? I blinked. What? In our kitchen, your recipe, small batches, sell 'em under your own name. I let out a bitter laugh. Micah, come on, that's what? A lemonade stand. You think some little jars on a folding table are going to compete with a 30-year-old family brand? He held up his phone. Not a folding table. These are listings for independent grocers, farm shops, boutique stores, local, real businesses. There's a market, Dana. People love small batch, artisanal, unique. You're already making better product than half of them. I stared at him, heart thudding. That's crazy. His lips twitched into a grin. Not if one of them likes crazy. I looked away, back toward the trees. The wind was picking up now, cooler. Autumn brushing its fingers over the last days of summer. You're serious, I whispered. I'm serious, he said. And before you say it, no, I don't care what your dad thinks. I don't care if Ashley burns the whole factory down trying to pasteurize grape jelly. You've been making brilliance in a kitchen that treats you like a burden, so why not make brilliance here, where it's yours? I couldn't respond right away. Something in me ached too much. I pressed my palms together and stared down at the little nick in the porch rail where Micah had carved our initials the week we moved in. My whole life, I murmured, I've been trying to make them see me, waiting for permission to be something more than just a helper, and I keep thinking, if I just do better, if I'm perfect enough, maybe they'll stop looking past me. Micah was quiet for a long moment, then he leaned in. Stop waiting, start being. I turned toward him. He was already scrolling through the stores again, reading reviews, tapping notes. Like this was already happening, he looked up. I know you're scared, but I'm not. I believe in your jam, I believe in you. The tears came fast this time, but I let them. Because under the grief, under the years of being overlooked, something new was trying to bloom. A beginning. The kitchen didn't feel like a kitchen anymore. It felt like a lab, a haven, a second chance. It was nearly midnight when we finally cleared the counter space and laid out the tools. Micah pulled out the big stock pot we usually used for stews in the winter, and I lined up my jars in a neat row like tiny soldiers waiting for orders. The farmhouse was quiet. Crickets hummed outside the screen door, and Billie Holiday crooned low from the old speaker Micah kept perched on the windowsill. There were no fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, no cold tile floors or the clank of commercial trays. Just us and the smell of sugar melting into fruit. Micah stirred the pot, squinting like the bubbling jam might jump at him. How thick should it be? Think velvet, I said, leaning in to check the consistency. Smooth, but with enough body to cling to a biscuit. He gave me a crooked smile. Never thought I'd hear you talk dirty to a jam. I laughed, really laughed for the first time in days. My shoulders finally started to unclench. You sure we have enough jars? He asked, glancing at the 12 cleaned and sterilized mason jars stacked by the sink. We'll make it work, I said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. This is just a test batch, a flirtation, we're not married to it yet. He dipped the wooden spoon into the mixture and held it up. Is it ready? I took the spoon, let the jam coat my tongue. Still too bright. The cherry needed a touch more softness. Half a squeeze of lemon and a whisper of vanilla, I said. Micah raised an eyebrow. You want me to measure a whisper? It's an instinct, I teased. One you develop when your ideas get laughed out of the family kitchen. His smile faded, but not with pity, with understanding. He stepped back and let me take over. With the kind of practiced rhythm I hadn't used in weeks, I adjusted the sugar, stirred slow, watched the mixture darken and thicken until it gleamed like garnet. Then I ladled a small spoonful into a chilled ramekin, popped it in the freezer for a minute, and tested the set. When it wrinkled just right under my fingertip, I knew. This is it, I said softly. I dipped a clean spoon, blew on it, and tasted. Then I gasped. Micah looked up, suddenly alert. What's wrong? I just stared at the spoon, then at him. Micah, this is it. He took a bite, his eyebrows shot up. Okay, wow, okay. It's everything I wanted it to be. Bright, floral, deep. It doesn't taste like Whitley jam, it tastes like possibility. We looked at each other, the weight of the moment finally settling between us. If this flops, I whispered, at least it'll be our flop. Micah stepped closer, brushed a streak of jam off my cheek with his thumb. But what if it doesn't? That question sat there like a spark waiting to catch. We moved in quiet unison after that, pouring, sealing, labeling. I didn't have custom stickers yet, just a handwritten strip of masking tape that read Dana's hibiscus cherry, batch 1. We filled 10 jars before the batch ran out. We left them cooling on the counter, the soft ping of each seal popping into place echoing like applause. I leaned back against the sink, staring at our tiny, jam-covered battlefield. You know, I said, voice low, I used to think if I ever left the factory I'd be walking away from everything I'd built. And now? Micah asked. I looked at the jars. Now I think I'm just getting started. He crossed the kitchen and wrapped his arms around my waist. So, what do we do next? We sleep, I said, laughing as I rested my head on his shoulder. Then we see if anyone out there wants to taste a little rebellion in a jar. The next afternoon, the 12 glass jars clinked together inside a cardboard produce box lined with a dish towel. I clutched it like it was a newborn. Micah drove us the 30 minutes to Waynesville in his old pickup, hands steady on the wheel, while I ran through every possible disaster in my head. What if the jam fermented? What if the shop owner hated floral notes? What if the jars shattered on impact with the counter, and I just stood there blinking, covered in cherry syrup and humiliation? You're breathing like you're about to deliver a TED Talk, Micah said gently. I feel like I'm going to be sick, I admitted, staring down at the taped-on labels, Dana's hibiscus cherry, batch 1. He reached over and gave my hand a squeeze. One store, that's all it is. Worst case, we eat jam for the next year. Worst case, I get laughed out of town. He glanced at me. Then we laugh louder on the way home. The sign for Three Pines Farm Market came into view, wooden, hand-painted, with a crooked charm that reminded me of everything I wanted this jam to be. Honest, local, a little wild. Micah parked beside a dusty Subaru and I forced myself to get out of the truck. The autumn air was crisp and carried that cozy mountain scent, part smoke, part apple rinds, part cold dirt. My boots crunched over gravel as I walked up the steps of the porch, box in my arms, my stomach in my throat. The shop itself smelled like heaven-baked goods, fresh hay, cinnamon sticks. Wooden crates overflowed with apples and squashes, and chalkboard signs advertised goat soap and local raw honey. Behind the counter stood a woman with silver curls pulled into a red bandana and a stare that said she didn't suffer fools. Her name tag read Nancy in bold red script. You deliver in? She asked, eyeing the box. Sort of, I said. I'm Dana. I made a small batch of jam I'd love you to try, just a sample. No pressure. Nancy leaned over the counter like she'd heard this pitch before and didn't have high hopes. Everyone and their cousins making jam this time of year. Right, I said quickly. But this one's a bit different, hibiscus and cherry. Floral start, bright finish. Balanced pH, small batch. I infused the hibiscus instead of steeping. Nancy held up a hand. Just give me a spoon. Micah handed one over from the small bag we'd brought, and I opened a jar with trembling fingers. The pop of the seal echoed like a gunshot in my ears. Nancy dipped the spoon, inspected the color, then tasted. Then she paused, her brow lifted, her lips pressed together thoughtfully. I stopped breathing. Nancy tapped her spoon on the rim of the jar, set it down, and looked at me with a slow nod. That's got kick, real backbone. Kick, I blinked. In a good way, in the best way, she said. Tastes like someone finally gave cherry a personality. I'll take the crate. I stared at her. All 12 jars, she laughed. You think I'm gonna taste that and send you home? Tourists eat this kind of thing up. You got a brand. I glanced at Micah. Sort of, I'm still figuring that part out. Nancy slid a small receipt book toward me. Figure it out later. Leave me your number, write it right here. And when you have more, you call me. I did as she asked, trying to keep my handwriting from shaking. She tore out the receipt, added a note across the top in careful cursive. Let me know when you have more. Nancy, we stepped outside, sunlight suddenly brighter than it had been 10 minutes ago. I stood on the gravel drive, holding that receipt like it was a trophy. My heart beat fast, confused between disbelief and something else, something bigger. Micah nudged me. So, was that as bad as you thought? I laughed, a short disbelieving sound. I think I just made my first sale. You did. For jam I made in our kitchen. Yep. I looked down at the empty box in my hands. Micah, she bought all of it. He smiled and slung an arm around my shoulders. Then we better make more. The euphoria from our first sale lasted exactly 2 days. Then I walked back into the factory on Monday morning and remembered exactly who I was expected to be. Not an innovator. Not a small batch creator with her own customer and handwritten receipt. Just the older sister who picked up everyone's slack without complaint. By 10 a.m., my head was pounding. I stood in the back office, rubbing my temples while the screen in front of me blinked, empty again. The fruit shipment data hadn't been entered. Not the Bartlett pears, not the raspberries, not even the flats of strawberries I'd personally signed off on when they arrived Saturday afternoon. Ashley sat on the rolling stool across from me, scrolling through her phone like we were waiting for our nails to dry instead of preparing for a 3-day jam production schedule. I exhaled slowly. Ashley, you didn't log the fruit shipment. She looked up, chewing her gum like it was a performance. Huh, the shipment, I repeated. You signed for it. The crates are in the cold room, but they're not in the system. That means they're not accounted for in production. Which means if we run a batch without updating, it throws off the weight tallies and expiration projections. Ashley blinked. Oh, right, I meant to, I just couldn't figure out how to get into the form. You literally just double-click the template and enter the poundage, that's it. She shrugged, unbothered. I'm just not a tech person. A tiny vein pulsed in my temple. I turned the monitor toward her. Ashley, you're the production manager. Entering inventory is the bare minimum of your job. Don't talk to me like I'm stupid, she snapped, sitting up straighter. I've been here every day. And I've been here every night, I shot back. Finishing what you start and walk away from. Silence stretched between us. She looked away first, muttering something under her breath as she pulled her phone back out. I stared at the blank form on the screen. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I shouldn't do it for her. She was supposed to learn, right? If you care that much, Dad had said, then teach her. But that wasn't what this was. He hadn't assigned me as her mentor. He'd offloaded his responsibility and hoped I'd pick it up like I always had. I glanced toward the door. Dad had been gone all morning at a supplier meeting. Mom was out front labeling jars. No one would notice if this data just never got entered, except the USDA would, and the auditors, and the stores relying on clean logs. And I would never hear the end of it, so I typed. Slowly at first. Then with the familiar efficiency of someone who's been doing it thanklessly for years. I logged the strawberries, marked the Bartletts, added the ripeness codes for the raspberries. I cross-checked the invoices, verified crate counts. adjusted the arrival timestamps to match the delivery manifest. By the time I finished, my tea had gone cold and Ashley had left the room. The ache in my neck was sharp now, radiating down between my shoulder blades. I rolled my shoulders, stood, and walked to the cooler to triple-check the shelf placements. The labels were wrong. The raspberry crates were stacked above the pears, which violated our storage protocol because pears bruise easier. I corrected that too. By lunch, I was exhausted, and no one had thanked me. No one even knew. In the break room, Ashley was laughing with Mom about something on her phone, and I sat in the corner eating leftover pasta from a Tupperware container like a ghost in my own life. Micah texted, "How's it going? Need me to bring reinforcements? Jam or wine?" I smiled at my screen, the first real smile of the day. No reinforcements, but maybe wine, and maybe don't ask how it's going. He sent back a heart and a jam jar emoji. I looked around at the women I shared blood with and wondered how something so simple, being seen, being appreciated, could feel like a foreign language here. My jars were on someone's shelf now, a stranger who chose me. And here. I couldn't even get my sister to learn a spreadsheet. Wednesday came in like a storm with no warning. No thunder, no clouds, just a crack of lightning right through my spine. I was midway through updating the monthly yield report, hunched over the laptop in the back room again, nursing a stale cup of gas station coffee. The room was hot and quiet except for the soft hum of the mini-fridge and the occasional bang of crates out in the factory floor. My eyelids were sandpaper. I'd been up until 2 a.m. the night before correcting Ashley's mislabeled lids again. She'd tagged half the strawberry jam as raspberry. If I hadn't caught it in time, it would have gone to market mislabeled. That kind of mistake could tank a vendor relationship in a heartbeat. I saved the spreadsheet and rubbed my temples. That's when the door slammed open. Everett charged in like he was still 25 and full of backroad fury. He tossed a manila file onto the desk so hard it slid and smacked the keyboard. "Your numbers are sloppy," he barked. "This whole month's off, we can't afford your laziness." The room shrank around me. I blinked at the file. "What numbers?" "The pear yields. You've got a whole crate missing from the report. It throws off the batch cost, Dana. It screws the books." My hands went still on the desk. I knew exactly what crate he was talking about. It was the extra flat we'd gotten from Henderson's farm, delivered last Friday, when Ashley was supposed to log everything and didn't. "I corrected that on Monday," I said carefully. "It's in the revised log. Not in the version I got this morning," he snapped. I had to sit there in front of the buyer from Blue Ridge Grocers and explain why our cost sheet looked like a toddler did it. "Did Ashley give you the updated file?" I asked. He waved me off. "Don't blame your sister." I swallowed hard. "I'm not blaming her, I'm stating a fact. She didn't input the flat. I stayed late to fix it after hours." Everett stepped closer, looming in that familiar, quiet threat kind of way. "You think staying late gives you an excuse to screw up?" "I didn't screw up," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted. "I fixed the screw up. Then fix it right next time." He grabbed the file, slapped it shut, and turned toward the door. "We don't have time for emotional excuses, just do your job." The words hit harder than they should have. My job? I stared at the empty doorway after he left. My body didn't move. My fingers stayed curled on the keyboard. My breath caught mid-chest like it didn't know whether to sigh or scream. Micah's voice echoed in the back of my head from the porch 2 nights ago. "You've been making brilliance in a kitchen that treats you like a burden." And here I was, being told I was lazy by the man who gave my job away, and hadn't looked me in the eye since. I leaned back in the creaky chair, staring at the ceiling tiles, and whispered under my breath, "This is because I dared to dream." That was the sin, wasn't it? Not the jam, not the mistake I hadn't made. The sin was not staying in the lane he carved for me. The sin was thinking I could build something of my own. The sin was refusing to shrink, even after he tried to make me smaller. And the injustice wasn't just sharp. It was rotting, like overripe fruit left to collapse under its own weight. My jaw clenched. I wanted to march out there, slam the corrected report on his desk, list every task Ashley had dropped this week that I picked up. But I knew how it would go. He'd deflect. He'd twist. He'd say I was overreacting, emotional, ungrateful. So instead, I opened the correct version of the spreadsheet, added a timestamp, printed it, and placed it gently, professionally in the outbox by the main door. He'd never thank me for it. He'd never admit he was wrong. He wouldn't even read it. But I would know. And more importantly, this time, I wouldn't forget. It was nearly dark by the time I got home. I didn't even bother with the front door. I kicked off my boots at the porch steps and walked straight around to the back, where the golden light from our kitchen window spilled across the yard like it was trying to coax me home. Micah was already out there, sitting cross-legged on the porch floor, surrounded by a mess of blank labels, scissors, and a Sharpie tucked behind one ear like some kind of country librarian. A stack of clean jars waited beside him, polished and ready. He didn't look up when I approached, just kept folding and smoothing and placing each little rectangle into the growing pile. "Hey," he said simply, as if we'd been talking a minute ago and I'd just stepped away to grab something. I collapsed beside him with a groan and rested my forehead on my knees. "That bad?" he asked. "I think today was the official moment I stopped being angry," I said into my jeans. I just felt done. Micah didn't push. He just handed me a stack of labels and the Sharpie. I took it. We folded in silence for a while. The paper crinkled softly in the evening air, the cicadas humming their usual lullaby from the trees. I could smell basil from the planter box by the steps, and the faintest trace of cinnamon still clung to Micah's shirt from whatever he'd been baking that afternoon. "I think my dad's getting ready to fire me," I said, finally. Micah looked up. "He what?" "I don't know for sure, he hasn't said it. But the way he's been looking at me lately, like I'm a problem to manage instead of a person, it's like, the more I stand up straight, the more he wants me to sit back down." Micah reached for my hand and squeezed gently. "And what if he does?" The question landed heavier than I expected. I stared at our joined hands, calloused fingers against ink-smudged fingertips. I tried to make it sound like a joke. "Then I guess I'll have more time to stir jam and cry into the fruit." Micah didn't laugh. "Then we go all in." I blinked. "What, we go all in?" he repeated. "We've already got more orders than jars." "Nancy called this afternoon asking if we could bring more by Friday. That boutique place in Maggie Valley emailed back too, they want samples." I stared at him. "Wait, what?" He reached into the crate behind him and pulled out a crumpled sticky note with scribbled names and numbers. "You've got customers now, Dana, real ones, who pay and thank you and actually like the taste of what you make." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "I know this isn't what you planned," Micah said, softer now. "I know you were raised to think stability means sticking with the name on the building instead of the name on your heart. But baby, you are the work, they just got the roof." I swallowed hard. "And what if we fail?" Micah leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "Then we fail, together, in our kitchen, with your name on every jar and your hands in every batch. But at least we'd be failing forward." I blinked against the tears suddenly prickling behind my eyes. I wasn't someone who cried often, not over things I couldn't fix, but something about hearing it out loud that we were doing this, that I wasn't just quietly patching holes in a sinking family ship, I was building something new with someone who believed in me. It cracked something open. I wiped at my eyes and managed a smile. "You make it sound like we're opening a bakery." "One thing at a time," he said. "Let's just keep our jam customers alive through the holidays." I glanced at the folded labels, now forming a neat stack. "We still need a name." Micah looked thoughtful. "You always said the jam reminded you of something small and unexpected. A quiet surprise, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Something that didn't ask to be seen but was worth noticing when you did." He nodded. "How about sparrowberry?" The words hung in the air between us, simple and soft. I felt them settle on my skin like a feather. "Sparrowberry," I repeated. Micah smiled. "Small wings. Big flavor." I laughed, the sound bubbling up from someplace deep and real. For the first time in weeks, the fear didn't feel like it owned me. It was still there, sure, but so was this quiet belief that maybe I wasn't alone in the risk. I picked up the Sharpie and wrote the name on the next label. One word at a time, I folded my future in half. The office still smelled like ink and dust, and the faint trace of old blackberry preserves, sticky memories embedded in the floorboards. Dad's cluttered desk hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cracked stapler, same chipped coffee mug that said Jam Boss, and the same crumpled sticky notes piled like fallen leaves around his calculator. The only new thing in the room was the crisp white envelope in my hand. I stood quietly in the doorway, watching him scribble numbers into a ledger, completely unaware that something was about to shift. Not just for me, for all of us. I stepped inside. He didn't look up. "If you're here to rehash the yield report, save it. I've got bigger fires to put out." I walked forward and placed the envelope in the middle of his desk, sliding it onto his spreadsheet. Everett's pen froze. His eyes lifted slowly to mine. I'm leaving, I said. He stared like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Leaving where? Here, I replied, voice steady. Whitley Jam, effective immediately. A pause, then just like that, the explosion. You what? He barked, leaping to his feet, sending the desk chair skidding back. You don't get to just walk out. I didn't flinch. I gave you this job, Dana. You think you can just up and quit when it gets hard. What about your commitment to this family? I gave you commitment, I said. Years of it, quiet loyalty. I trained your staff, built your systems, fixed your daughter's mistakes while you gave her my title. Everett's jaw flexed. She needs guidance. You were supposed to help her. I did, I snapped. And then I got blamed when she failed. He slammed a palm against the desk. Who's going to train her now? Who's going to keep things running while she learns? I took a breath, let the calm settle over me like armor. She can figure it out herself. His eyes narrowed. This is about that jam of yours, isn't it? You're chasing some pipe dream in your kitchen while we've got a legacy to uphold. No, I said softly. This is about respect, and I'm finally giving it to myself. Silence fell over the room. For the first time in my life, my father looked like a man who couldn't solve the problem in front of him. Not with numbers, not with control, not with shame. I turned to leave. Dana, he said, voice low. I stopped at the door. You walk out now, there's no coming back. I looked over my shoulder, met his eyes. I know. Then I walked out, with nothing in my hands but everything I'd ever needed. I hadn't realized how heavy the keys felt until I dropped them into the kitchen junk drawer. The clink echoed a little too loud in the quiet. It was done. I had walked out of the place I thought I'd be tied to forever, and the world didn't end. Micah didn't say anything when I came through the door earlier than expected, just handed me a spoon and pointed toward the simmering pot on the stove. Apricot basil, he said with a little smirk. Something new, thought we'd play. Now we sat at the kitchen table, both of us in flannel, the windows fogged with steam and the scent of fruit sweetening the air. The jam cooled in freshly sealed jars lined up like little suns on the counter. The basil was subtle, but it gave the apricot this grounded, almost woodsy edge. It tasted like something brave. We clinked our spoons together like glasses of champagne. To something new, I said. Micah grinned. To you. We took bites, still smiling. My whole body felt like it had just unclenched for the first time in years. So, he said, licking a bit of jam from the back of his spoon. What's next, aside from this batch going straight to Nancy, of course? I leaned back in my chair thinking. Holiday gift boxes, maybe, with handwritten cards and tiny jars or a sampler trio. People go nuts for anything with twine and a rustic sticker. Sticker we still haven't designed, he reminded me. I waved a hand toward the pile of notebook sketches beside the fruit bowl. I'm circling it. He raised an eyebrow. You circled it yesterday and the day before, I shrugged. I was dealing with the apocalypse. He chuckled. Fair enough. I looked around our kitchen. At the cluttered counter, the cooling jars, the sticky spoon on the cutting board, and my handwritten notes taped to the wall beside the stove like command center maps. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was playing pretend. This is real, isn't it? I whispered. Micah reached over and laced his fingers with mine. Feels real to me, I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Then we need a website, something clean but warm, earth tones, soft fonts, that sort of thing. I can build the framework, he offered. But you're writing the copy, I groaned. Do you want poetic jam puns or anxious business jargon? I want you, he said. Your words, your voice. People are going to buy sparrowberry jam because it feels like you. That's the difference. His confidence wrapped around me like a quilt, soft but stitched from something unshakable. We sat there in our little farmhouse kitchen, jam cooling, dreams forming, the rest of the world slipping away for just a few breaths. But even as I let myself bask in that moment, I felt a quiet ripple just beneath my skin. This wasn't the end. Everett wasn't done. Whitley Jam wasn't just going to shrug and move on without me. And Ashley, thrown into a role she hadn't earned, would eventually fumble in ways even my father couldn't ignore. There would be fallout. There always is when something breaks loose from a system that's been built on control. But for now, for tonight, there was jam. There was peace. And there was this quiet, fierce knowledge that I was finally building something of my own. From scratch. 3 months later, I stood in the center of a bustling commercial kitchen, hair tied back, apron streaked with apricot, and elbows deep in basil stems. The hum of mixers, the soft clang of lids, and the low buzz of the dehumidifier filled the space like music. On the counter beside me sat the latest issue of Blue Ridge Harvest, folded neatly open to page 34. There I was. A half-page spread. Meet the maker, Dana Whitley of Sparrow Berry. They'd taken the photo right here in this very kitchen, sunlight catching the amber of the apricot basil jar I'd nervously held in both hands. The caption beneath it quoted me, "Sometimes you have to leave home to taste freedom." Nancy had cried when she saw it. Orders exploded overnight. Stores were calling me now. Local restaurants wanted exclusive flavors. A microbrewery asked if I could collaborate on a spiced peach ale. We could barely keep up with the demand. I had a team now. A website. Branded labels with real packaging. And I was weeks away from moving into my own kitchen space. Leased, signed, and paid for under the name Sparrow Berry LLC. Everything I'd been told was impossible was happening. And that's when he showed up. I was taste testing a new plum rosemary batch when I heard the door creak open and felt the cold slip in behind it. I turned. There, standing in the doorway with his hat in one hand and pride swallowed like a hard pill, was Everett Whitley. His boots left faint mud tracks on the concrete floor as he stepped inside. He looked out of place, like someone time-traveled a stubborn man out of 1994 and dropped him into a modern food startup. I didn't move, just watched. He glanced around, at the stainless tables, the labeled crates, the glass jars lined with barcode stickers and careful branding. At my team, who had all gone still behind me, eyes shifting toward the man with the storm cloud expression. Finally, he spoke. "We need you," I blinked. "Excuse me," he cleared his throat. "Whitley Jam, it's not doing well." "That's so," his jaw tensed. "Ashley's trying, but she can't keep up, orders are behind. One of the stores dropped us last week. I thought maybe we could talk." I let out a short, humorless breath. "Talk. You know the business," he said, trying to keep his voice level. "You built half the systems. These new flavors, they're different. People are asking for your jam, even customers we've had for years." He looked older than I remembered, like the months had weathered him, not with time but with regret. "Come back," he said. "We need you." I walked toward him slowly, each step echoing on the tile. "You need me now," I said, stopping a few feet away. "Now that the numbers are off and Ashley's burning through the stockroom and your legacy is slipping." He opened his mouth, then shut it. I nodded, more to myself than him. "I needed you too, Everett. I needed you when you laughed at my ideas. When you called my innovation a joke. When you gave away my job and told me to smile about it." Silence. I tilted my head. "You didn't show up then, and now that I'm standing on my own 2 feet with my name on something I built, you want to pretend like we're partners." His face turned red, but he didn't deny it. I looked around the room, the glint of jars, the quiet strength of my team, the smell of fresh fruit and fire. "You should go," I said gently. "There's nothing left for you here." He hesitated, then nodded. Everett turned and left, his boots echoing on the cement until the door clicked shut behind him. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just walked back to the stove, picked up the tasting spoon, and stirred. The jam didn't burn. Neither did I 1 year later. I stood behind a cedarwood booth at the Asheville Saturday Market, hands dusted with label glue and the scent of plum ginger on my skin. The sign above read in soft hand-painted letters, "Sparrow Berry, crafted by Dana." The jars caught the morning light like stained glass. Apricot basil, cherry hibiscus, blueberry thyme, even our newest, apple maple with a cinnamon finish. Customers came in waves. Locals, tourists, old ladies with canvas totes, dads with toddlers on their shoulders. A little girl with 2 messy braids came up to the table, barely tall enough to peek over the edge. Her mom handed her a tasting spoon and she dipped it into the tiny sample cup of blackberry lavender. She took one bite, eyes going wide. "This tastes like magic," she whispered. I smiled and knelt so we were face to face. "It tastes like being seen," I told her softly. "Like someone made it just for you." She grinned. Her mom bought 2 jars. Micah waved from the booth next to mine, where he sold homemade bread and smiled like this was always the plan. I waved back, heart full. People were lining up now and I didn't feel tired. I felt built, piece by piece, flavor by flavor, name by name, not Whitley's daughter, not support staff, just Dana. And finally that was enough. And that was the end of my story. But sometimes I still wonder, when my father showed up in my kitchen asking me to come back, was he really sorry or just scared of losing control? Did he do the right thing, or was it just too little, too late? Tell me in the comments. Have you ever seen someone apologize only when they had something to lose? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more true life stories, and share if this one stirred something in you.